2 out of 3. Come on, you can do all 3. Doesn't show me which ones either. I just have to wait for it to say everything's good. 3 out of 3. All right, there we go. Good afternoon. Hope you're having a good day or good evening, depending on where you're seeing this. Yeah, hope you had a good Monday. Hope you survived the shift in time that we had to do this morning. I had an important meeting this morning with someone who let me know that thankfully they did it at like 5 a.m., but they somehow managed to not hear about the shift, the spring forward. So yeah, had that been me, I think I probably would have missed a good part of my work day. Anyway, like I said, I hope you're having a good day. So this is my first book middles stream. So I'm going to make it up as I go along here just a little bit. I'm going to be talking about the Monsters of Templeton, specifically, since I'm reading a couple different books right now. And I'm not that far in. I mentioned before that I am a very, very slow reader. I forgot. I've got to put up. I tend to, if I don't put something up here, I'm not going to look at the camera enough. In fact, I'm still not looking at it. So may as well show this now. I've devised a little something I can look at here. Where I have a little magnetic platform. I have a little person I can look at. Let's go ahead and mount them up there. So yeah, this should be good. Even just by chapter 3, I think there's some good material to talk about in terms of the content of the book. Do I think I'm going to enjoy it? Do I have any opinions formed on the writing style? Sure I do. And do I think I'm going to finish it? Because, you know, unlike in the past where I made myself finish it, if I read page 1 of something, like, well, now I'm committed, I can't be a quitter, I have to read the whole thing, and so I just stopped reading a lot of the time, because if you're reading an awful book and you're trying to force yourself to read it, you're not going to read. Or at least I didn't. So before I do that, let's talk a little bit about some other things that have been going on. Let's see, couple goals for the streams. One of them is to stream earlier, like I'm doing now, because frankly, if I put this off until later in the evening, it cuts off the entire East Coast. And when I was streaming, doing gaming related things, for whatever reason, a lot of the traffic I got was actually folks from the East Coast. So, hey Jamie, if you happen to come by and see this, I haven't seen you for a while. Hopefully I can get you to stop by here now and then. Even though I'm not playing Fallout here. But on that note, I'm probably going to be playing Fallout a little bit. What I thought I'd do, I thought about sitting down Friday night and giving an update on my writing progress. How's the novel going? You know, just kind of talk through what are some of the challenges I'm facing. Am I happy with it? Am I, you know, what's going on with that? And I thought, well, me just sitting here looking at the camera, talking about the novel in the abstract, I don't know. I wasn't too thrilled about the idea. I thought, however, if I can find a good, regular, sort of a mindless game to play, it might be a little bit more fun, you know, might draw in a different audience. So I think what I'm going to try to do is find a fun but mindless game I can play where I can use that to give my status updates on what was the week in writing, how did things go. Maybe even use that as a way to get some other people in, do some group gaming. We'll see where it goes. So that's one thing. I made my first attempt at a pre-recorded post because I have an idea to do a kind of post called Book to Film. And the idea is that as soon as I finish a book, then I will go ahead and watch the film version, if there's a film version, and do a comparison between the two. And since I finished Fight Club last week, I thought, perfect. I've never actually seen the movie. Let's go watch it. And I just saw something go by, and I'm not sure what that was. I just saw a little alert went by. If you said something to me, my apologies. I don't have my specs on. I'm doing librarian mode here again. Well, they look really grungy in this light. Ew. Terribly sorry if you can see that. Anyway, yeah, so Friday night, I thought, cool, we'll watch Fight Club. Just don't feel like wearing those right now. But anyway, I'll watch Fight Club. and I'll do a comparison to the book. And I'm not really big on the idea of typical reviews where you say, here's where the film wasn't as good as, here's where it was better, here's my rating, here's a number or a letter score or letter grade or something. I wanted to ask some different questions. I'll save that for now, though. I could probably ramble on that for a long time here. It ended up being a really, really productive exercise. Helped me cement some really good ideas about what makes a good story, the different means of storytelling and different media. Like, it was a really, really good exercise. And the film was kind of fun to watch. I don't know that it's one I'll ever be eager to go back and see again, but that I can say that about a lot of movies these days. So, the problem was with that segment, though, I recorded probably, with all the outtakes and me being the perfectionist, I think I probably recorded a good 2 hours of fairly high resolution video because it broke Doodle. It filled up my Doodle account in trying to transfer it automatically to sync it to my PC. Unfortunately, when I went back and looked at it, the autofocus was losing its mind throughout the whole thing. So while I was sitting there talking, and I didn't notice that it was kind of flitting in and out. I don't see it doing that now. I can see it shaking a little bit because we have, when I move at all, wow, okay. When I move at all, we have kind of bouncy floors, and it's going to move the light and the camera stand and everything, or the phone stand. Anyway, so I will probably get back to that. I might try just doing a live stream of it instead and kind of do a dump, like here are my thoughts. But let's get back to the main topic. So different kinds of things coming up. So one of them is going to be a how'd my week go? We'll do kind of a light, gaming thing. We'll be doing some book to film streams, maybe, since the pre-recorded thing didn't seem to work out that well. Oh, pardon me for a moment. I'm going to dismiss this thing from my camera. Let's see. What else? Getting on a regular schedule. So that's something I've never done great with streaming, because it's always been like a third tier or lower sort of a thing on my daily list. There's the day job, there's the helping around the house, and there's and so it's always kind of, it's been if I have time, I'll go ahead and I'll stream whenever I can. And that's been okay, but honestly, if I want people to be able to see this, be nice to have a regular showtime. Be nice to have a regular time to come on here and chat. So I'm going to try to get a schedule worked out. Specific kinds of content on specific days. We'll see how that goes. In terms of readings, I posted on Twitter. So my daughter found this in a local coffee shop. Like I have mentioned before, that the stuff that I'm writing draws on folklore. What I'm trying to draw on is folklore from sort of the more archetypal, the patterns in folklore. But a lot of those really, there is maybe a more dominant influence from Irish and, we'll say very broadly, because there's a lot of different categories within here. British folklore, Icelandic, and Nordic. But I'm also trying to work in Asian, African, because it turns out that a lot of the stories that you hear in folklore really do get retold in remarkably similar form across the world. It's a really interesting phenomena. And some of it you can sort of imagine they traveled as people traveled. In other cases, the stories are remarkably similar, and there's no obvious path connecting A and B. And so you're like, okay, is this just speaking to something a little bit more fundamental about human psychology, anthropology, or it's an interesting thing to me. But anyway, point is, I kind of collect books with fairy tales. I've got a book of Russian fairy tales. It's great. Really enjoy reading it. But my daughter found this, again, Irish folktales, in a local coffee shop. And the nice thing about this is I'm pretty sure all of these are public domain by now. I'm looking forward to reading through it and seeing if there's a good selection. Nothing too incredibly long, but I might take a stream and just read through one of these. If they're public domain, there shouldn't be any copyright issues, so that should be fun. What else? I think that's probably all the new stuff for now. Again, I've got so much material for Lots of ideas for content. We'll just see how it goes. Take it one day at a time. So let's talk a little bit about the Monsters of Templeton. How is it going? So I'm only in chapter 3, and that's not because I really have not been reading a ton for various reasons, work related. All of a sudden there's a lot going on in terms of just life stuff. You know how it goes. And so it isn't so much that I'm reading it that slowly as it is I really haven't dedicated enough time to reading. But we're in chapter 3. What have I seen so far? Let's talk first about the language. And something else I noticed from earlier streams is, so we're all opinionated about things deep down. But I think in talking about these things, if I want to participate in the writing community and not tick people off or sound like a jerk in general, I think I can probably do a better job of expressing things in terms of my own views of them and what I prefer and what I don't, as opposed to making these blanket statements that sound like I'm saying what is absolutely good or bad. I think there are some things that really are objectively good or bad, and time to time I may point those out, but I think you have to be very, very careful about those. I think it's probably more civil, friendly, diplomatic to make sure I'm expressing things in terms of what I'm seeing. And I say that because the very first thing is, in terms of the language in the book, it's not my favorite style of writing so far. It strikes me as being awkward in places. The rhythm isn't great. If I were reading it out loud, I feel like I'd probably be tripping over some of the word choices and the sentence structure. That said, it's not unclear. There's a certain sort of a minimum bar you have to hit for something to be readable, and I'm not saying it's only at the minimum, but it at least does that. I'm not at all confused about what's going on, and it is consistent in its voice, so good things. It really does just boil down to, it's not really my preferred style of writing. So what else? So that's about all I'll say there. I'm not expecting that to change throughout the book. I think they're probably going to be like, I don't love the descriptions. I don't love the word choice, the rhythm, the timing, and all that. There is something I am enjoying quite a bit more, though, and that is the way the story is structured, because this starts going towards the idea of writing rules. So how does this overlap with writing rules? Well, especially for new writers, people who are taking on their first novel, you're going to get I get no shortage of writing advice out there saying always this, never that. And this is true no matter what field you're in. It's not just writing, of course. It doesn't matter what you do. There's going to be these maxims that have been developed in that field that we all know are not entirely true. Studying science in college, I can remember an exchange between a very bright student and a professor who had finally just kind of lost it, where the student was correcting him over and over in this lower division chemistry class, saying, well, that's not true. That's not how that, no, you're ignoring it. And the teacher finally lost it and was like, look, I know it's not 100% accurate, but this is what we need to do now to get people in the door. This is what we need in order to teach the basics. You correct all that later. And that was true in, this was a chemistry course. I studied physics, and that was definitely true there. You get the certain equations early on that vastly oversimplify things. And then you get to relativity, and you relearn a bunch of things. You learn something more precise. And even then you learn that this is still an oversimplification of, you consider these other more general things. So all that to say, of course, writing has those too. That the problem in any of those cases is where you do end up with this pattern where someone will present that oversimplified advice, and then someone else maybe doesn't realize that it's just advice and begins to kind of take it on as an absolute rule. And that then cycles. Like they may find some success, that's great, and then it gets repeated as an absolute. And so out in the community, you see a lot of people really earnestly advocating this idea of always this, never that, like no adverbs. Because Stephen King once said, I can't remember how he phrased it, but basically it was don't use adverbs. Well, of course you're going to use adverbs at some point. It's perfectly fine to use adverbs. What isn't fine is being lazy about your word choice. And that makes it sound like it's about word choice. And a lot of the time it isn't, because there are other ways of describing things that use very common words. You can actually use some words that feel lazy because they're small, simple, and straightforward, but you use them in ways that give a more compact, information-dense meaning to something. One of my favorite descriptions from Chuck Palahniuk's writing book, which I'll come back to at some point, was describing this guy who is up on a rooftop. This is in Paris. I won't describe the full setup. We'll save that for another time. But he's up really high, and he's climbing out onto the ledge, and it's dangerous. And he describes the guy as being suicide high. And in that two-word description, you get a perfect conveyance of the meaning of what he's talking about. He's up high enough that if he falls, he's going to kill himself. And there's even this sort of idea that's wrapped up in that what he's doing is risky and maybe even a little stupid, like he's going to kill himself if he isn't careful. It's a great description. So there you go. It's simple words, but so where am I going with this? Let's keep it grounded. All the way back to don't use adverbs is silly. It's not really an absolute rule. But it's a lot more difficult to convey all the subtlety involved. Well, one of the rules I came across in the last couple days that someone was advocating across multiple videos they had produced was never start your story with a character in getting out of bed, waking up, getting out of bed. And of course followed on by never start a story with a dream sequence. And I think of this and I go immediately to Cormac McCarthy's The Road. The Road begins in the first paragraph with a character waking up and then describes the dream sequence. And you can maybe say, oh, that's Cormac McCarthy. He's a brilliant writer. He's a master of his craft. This is true. And the example from The Road, it is, exemplary writing. But it's not Cormac McCarthy himself that somehow imbues what he's written with some kind of special power. It's yes, he knows how to use it well. But other people can do that too. The problem is not having a character wake up and get out of bed in the start of your story. The problem is too much detail where you're following around your character like a documentarian instead of telling the story. If there's something extraordinarily pertinent about them starting the story when they're in bed, start the story with them waking up. However, knowing that if you then send that to a publisher, that they may look at that and go, oh, cliche, and off it goes. Because what we're talking about here ends up being not so much a writing rule as it is a rule of the publishing industry. If you know that there are certain tells that they use in your manuscript that are going to make them reject it sooner, don't use them. In this case, I was thinking about, because that's where my story starts, and I will defend the idea of having a character, it doesn't start with him with the main protagonist waking up, but it's pretty close. It's close enough that I'm looking at it and thinking, never mind that I'm convinced this is exactly where it should begin. This could be a problem. So what will I do? I'll probably write an alternate beginning so that when I'm submitting it, it just doesn't have that sort of hallmark. It doesn't have that thing that might get it rejected. And then later, if it works out and if I find someone has interest in publishing the book, then we can talk about it, because at that point we're past that, But anyway, back to the idea of writing rules. So there's all these rules that you hear about your first novel, what to do, what not to do. And I so often, whenever I hear a rule, the first thing I'm going to do is weigh it against as much as I can remember of what I've read and think, okay, what breaks this? What are the books I know that are going to go against this? Not just because I'm trying to be, contrarian. I'm not just trying to, prove every rule I've ever heard wrong. By comparing it to a counterexample, you very often are going to get a much deeper understanding of what the rule is really trying to get at, right? So you tell me no adverbs. I'm going to go find the opening to Kill a Mockingbird, which I haven't read for a while, but I remember that was one of the ones I looked at after I had heard that rule, and I'm like, haha, I'm like, nope, here we go. Okay, so the rule was really, what's it really trying to say? So the rule that I heard, okay, let's see, we were talking about the don't start in bed, don't do this. Well, so another one I have been hearing lately is single point of view, single perspective. And this finally gets back to the Monsters of Templeton here. Hopefully you get the idea here. But anyway, so the Monsters of Templeton. Chapter 1 is, and before I go on any further, so I mentioned this before, but I'm about to talk about details of the book. I don't know that I would call it spoilers so much, but I'm going to talk about the content of each chapter. So if you don't want to know what's in the book, you can basically skip to the next video, I think, because I'm probably going to talk about the book for the rest of this stream. So that said, spoiler warnings, here we go. So chapter 1 is our protagonist coming home to her hometown and going in to see her mom and telling her, I'm pregnant, and my college professor is the father. And the mom being upset, we learn that mom's kind of a hippie or an ex-hippie. Now she's maybe, as the protagonist puts it, kind of a religious nut, maybe. We come back to that idea a couple times. And so there you go. So it's her coming home and telling her this, and part we read actually out loud was the man in a boat discovers the dead monster in the lake. And then we jump to the protagonist coming home. And then we go out to, a bunch of boats have hauled the monster into shore. And so the protagonist goes down and touches it. And there's a description of this weird description of what it feels like. Well, actually, some of the better descriptive writing, I think, in the book so far. And that's kind of chapter 1. Chapter 2, we jump back in time. We're in the same location before the town was ever formed. And it's the man who founded the town going and claiming the land, surveying the land, going out and looking, climbing up this hill and looking down at the lake and seeing the spot where he has a vision of the town. He has a vision of the town, and he sees what is probably the monster, what is almost definitely the monster, deep beneath the surface of the lake. And we don't know why. This is what he sees. And this gets me back to, this is one of the reasons I was interested in this book in particular, is because it uses some of the same, whether you call it real magical realism or not, it uses some of the same techniques. It takes some ordinary everyday things and maybe elevates them a little bit to seem a little bit more mystical. And then it takes some extraordinary or unreal things and describes them in very plain, like straightforward, there's a monster in the lake, it just happened. And so it creates this nice, I'll have to come back to this to try to describe it more at some other point. But it allows you to use fantastical elements to convey much deeper emotions in the story that you might not be able to otherwise, without making them seem so much like fantasy elements. You're never expecting Merlin to walk onto the scene, or anyone to come, or dragons or whatever, unless that's the particular conceit in that story. So anyway, let's see. So chapter 2 is the founder going and surveying the spot for the town. Chapter 3 is then we're looking at the protagonist's mother when she's a little bit younger, and she's returning home as a hippie, and we're getting the idea that the town was pretty hard on her when she came back and was very judgmental of her. And that's about it. So here we have 3 chapters, 3 characters, 3 points of view. And I personally really like it. I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm obviously biased because this is also similar to what I'm trying to do in my story. I'm not jumping around quite so much, but you hear all sorts of things about how, don't do that. Just stay with the main character for a while. Let us settle into the story. Let us settle into that one character. And I think this book is a good example where you can say that that's a little bit of nonsense, because this works. It's not confusing at all. It's very clear from the first chapter that the place in which the story happens is very important. It's important to the story. If you read the foreword, it's important to the author too. And so focusing on dismissing some alerts again. Focusing on the town as much as any individual character is important to the story. And like I said, it's crystal clear. There's nothing in this that I feel confused about. I don't feel like I've lost interest in the characters. I don't feel like I am confused about when certain things are happening. It's all good. It's enjoyable, and I'm glad to see. Again, this is Lauren Groff's first published book, and so there's a little bit of a, from the reader seats, cheering on another first-time author doing something that challenges some of the established, make sure you do all these things, make sure your book ticks all these boxes. So yeah, I like seeing that. I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to seeing where the story goes. I like the story structure so far. It's good. So one thing I did not do last time that I forgot is, I'll show this. So you open up talking about how the town is very important to the book. Open it up to the first, the open front flap here, and you get a map of the town. It's kind of a nice thing. I mentioned before too that my own story is a little bit of a place story too. I don't think quite so much as this one. We'll have to see. What I had not considered was I've considered no visual aids at all for my own story. I'm thinking of it strictly as a traditional sort of novel, but this one, you actually get plates, I don't know. You get these black and white pictures. That is the founder of the town. And again, the founder of the town in the story is based on, not the founder of the town, but the founder of the town's son is based on James Fenimore Cooper, who wrote The Last of the Mohicans, based on Cooperstown, New York. And so in the chapter 3, we have pictures of the protagonist's mother, both as a little girl and, how does she describe it here? I have to get my glasses. As a child, in the middle of a recitation for all of her father's historian friends, and later as a young hippie. There you go. So yeah, to the questions of am I enjoying it? Yes. Am I going to keep reading? You bet. Do I see any potential problems? Other than I'm not in love with the language, not really. And that one's pretty easy to overcome. So I think that's about it. I'll wrap this one up for now. If you see this and if there's anything that you would like me to read, please drop it in the comments. If you have questions about the book, let me know. Like and subscribe, as they always say. Have a good evening, take care, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye. I guess I should let it roll out here. Just again, streaming software, if you stop it too soon, you get cut off. The actual video gets cut off unexpectedly. And if anyone out there actually knows how to edit the Facebook thumbnail, do let me know. Because it doesn't matter what I show at the beginning, you're going to get a weird view of the top of my head, apparently. So God bless, take care, we'll talk to you later. 3